The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, did not mince words. He called Gaza a massacre, a graveyard, and condemned the dehumanization of Palestinians by Israeli officials. Turk's speech before the UN Human Rights Council was a desperate plea to halt the mass killing of Palestinian civilians and the devastation of Gaza. He warned that genocidal rhetoric from senior officials is not just talk, it grants permission for atrocity. The world, he said, has failed Gaza, not out of ignorance, but out of a lack of will and courage. The UN, founded on the promise of never again, has been rendered impotent, its resolutions ignored. This is not a passive failure, it is a choice. Turk's call to act is not a suggestion, it is a moral imperative. The time for empty condemnations is over. The world is witnessing the systematic destruction of a society. The statistics are horrifying. A child killed every hour, on average, for nearly 2 years. This is not a war, it is a slaughterhouse. The powerful nations enabling this have blood on their hands. The question is no longer what is happening, but what will be done to stop it. The world cannot claim ignorance. The suffering is broadcast on every screen. The machinery of diplomacy has stalled, paralyzed by political interests. The international community's failure is active, not accidental. The call to end the massacre is urgent and non-negotiable. The world's inaction is complicity. The time to act is now. Gaza City's recent devastation exposes a brutal strategy not targeting militants, but erasing civilian life. In 72 hours, 5 high-rise apartment buildings, homes for families, were obliterated. The Israeli military's deepening attacks and mass call-up of reservists signal that nowhere is safe. This is the anatomy of a massacre, designed to terrorize and displace. Destroying residential towers erases any sense of normalcy, sending a clear message: leave or die. With over 90% of Gaza's housing destroyed, the goal is to make return impossible. Gaza's civil defense pulls bodies from rubble, witnessing the erasure of entire families. Over 9,000 are missing, buried beneath concrete, their fate unknown. Netanyahu's words are a death sentence for thousands trapped with no escape. The world's muted response is complicity. Silence greenlights the massacre. Each destroyed building is a testament to both brutality and the moral bankruptcy of a world that watches in silence. Genocide is the gravest crime under international law, and experts now say Israel's actions in Gaza meet that definition. The International Association of Genocide Scholars concluded that Israel's policies align with the UN Convention's definition of genocide. This is not political rhetoric, but a scholarly, evidence-based finding. The evidence: systematic attacks on civilians, destruction of vital infrastructure, mass displacement, and deliberate obstruction of aid. The intent is clear in the openly genocidal rhetoric of Israeli officials. Israel's dismissal of these findings is predictable, but the facts are undeniable. The legal case at the International Court of Justice is built on this mountain of evidence. The world faces a choice: accept the findings and act, or indulge the fiction of a complex conflict. The Genocide Convention obligates nations to prevent and punish this crime. Ignoring the evidence is complicity. Never again must mean something, now. Starvation in Gaza is not accidental. It is a deliberate strategy. A UN-backed body confirms famine is entrenched in Gaza City, a formal declaration of a crime against humanity. Israel's blockade, destruction of farmland, and bombing of bakeries have weaponized hunger. Hundreds have died from starvation and malnutrition: infants, the elderly, children. This suffering is man-made. Aid trucks are blocked at the border by arbitrary inspections. Starvation as a weapon is a war crime, yet it continues with global knowledge. The world knows a population is being deliberately starved. The failure to force open aid corridors is a profound moral and legal failure, especially by the United States. Famine is part of the broader genocidal process: to weaken, break, and kill. Destroying sustenance leaves only 2 options: flee or perish. The world cannot claim to protect civilians while allowing them to starve. Immediate, unconditional aid is the only credible response. Anything less is complicity. Gaza's catastrophe is the result of international failure, led by the United States. Decades of US diplomatic cover and arms have created Israeli impunity. The US is not a neutral mediator, it is the primary enabler of the atrocities. Each bomb and bullet in Gaza is tied to this pipeline of military aid. Even as some nations halt arms sales, the US remains the chief supplier. Recent US visa bans on Palestinians show open hostility, not neutrality, yet cracks are appearing. Turkey's boycott, European sanctions, and recognition of Palestine signal a shift. Global activism and some nations' stands are having an effect, but action is still too slow. The failure to impose a universal arms embargo and sanctions means the massacre continues. Every day of inaction is another day of complicity. The most direct way to stop the massacre is to halt the flow of weapons. The bombs killing Palestinians are supplied largely by the US and Western nations. Without this support, Israel's capacity for destruction would be severely limited. UN High Commissioner Turk's call for an arms embargo is a moral and legal obligation. The evidence of war crimes is overwhelming. Continuing arms sales is active complicity. Claims of defense are exposed as false. These weapons fuel a relentless assault on civilians. Some countries have suspended arms sales, proving change is possible. A comprehensive UN-enforced embargo is the next step. Citizens must demand their governments stop participating in these crimes. Halting weapons is the clearest path to de-escalation. The UN Security Council is paralyzed by the US veto, allowing the Gaza crisis to spiral. The Uniting for Peace resolution offers an alternative. The General Assembly can act when the Council fails. With a majority vote, the Assembly can recommend collective measures, protection forces, arms embargoes, tribunals. This mechanism bypasses the veto and carries immense moral and political weight. The movement to invoke Uniting for Peace for Palestine is a response to powerlessness. A General Assembly vote would isolate the US and show global consensus against the atrocities. The Assembly has already demanded an end to occupation. Uniting for Peace is the next step. The alternative is accepting a world where one nation's veto sanctions genocide. This is a democratic tool to bypass autocracy and act for peace. For Palestinians and international law, it may be the last chance. Gaza's civilians are defenseless. No army, no air force, nowhere safe. Ceasefire alone is not enough. The population remains vulnerable. An international protection force is urgently needed. Palestine's UN representative has formally requested such a force. UN peacekeepers have protected civilians worldwide. Their presence would deter further attacks. The force would monitor ceasefires and secure aid corridors. Political hurdles are real, but the primary security issue is the survival of Gaza's people. The responsibility to protect principle must be applied. Authorizing a force through Uniting for Peace is the most viable route. To leave Gaza unprotected is to accept mass death and the failure of the international system. Gaza's crisis has reached a tipping point. The evidence of genocide is overwhelming. Legal processes at the International Court of Justice and ICC are vital for accountability. But action is needed now. The first step, a total cessation of hostilities, enforced by the international community, and immediate humanitarian aid. Second, a universal binding arms embargo on Israel. Third, deployment of an international protection force to shield civilians. These are not radical. They are the minimum requirements of law and morality. The institutions created to prevent genocide are facing their greatest test. If the world fails now, international law will crumble and impunity will reign. The fight for Gaza is a fight for the soul of the world. Responsibility falls on governments, international bodies, and ordinary citizens. The people of Gaza have shown resilience. We cannot give up on them. The time for excuses is over. We must choose humanity, now.